Hi, my name is Chris Jablonski, and welcome to my very favorite new series, Big Questions, Little Answers, where my colleague Sam Foster and I share some very beginning small answers to some very large questions that many folks have on their way into relationship with First Church and with Unitarian Universalism more broadly. And one of the questions that many people ask is, how did Unitarianism and Universalism come about? And were they Christian churches? And the very short answer to this very large question is Unitarianism and Universalism, up until recently, were two separate religions. I say recently, the 1960s, they merged. But both of them were born out of theological conversations with Christian churches. So Unitarianism came around in conversation with the idea of Trinitarianism. And in the midst of the 1500s, folks, Miguel Servantes and other people read the Bible for the first time. And in reading the Bible, found no mention of the Trinity. And so started to question the doctrine of the Trinity, both put forth by the Catholic Church, but also, still embraced in a lot of the Protestant churches. People read the Bible, found it wasn't there, and so instead proposed this idea, this unified vision of God, that Jesus, the Holy Spirit, were not co-equal with God, but there was one God, one totality. And as you can imagine, that came at a great price. And Miguel Cervantes, one of the first people, he wrote The Errors of the Trinity, and he was persecuted and eventually burned at the stake for his heresy. So Unitarianism came out of that moment, and it wasn't until a couple hundred years later that it was embraced as a denominational identity. First, it was used as a slur, calling people Unitarians, and then William Ellery Channing and some of our other ancestors embraced it, and then they kind of rallied around that idea. So that's Unitarianism. And then Universalism was born out of a theological conversation with the doctrine of sort of the salvation of an elect few, that there was sort of this imagined angry God, this idea of sinners in the hands of an angry God, and that there was just a few places in heaven. And the Universalists, in conversation with that idea, basically said that God's nature was loving and that all people would eventually be saved, that heaven was the destination for all people. And in the very beginning, there was lots of complex machinations on how you eventually would get to heaven, where even the most evil among us could eventually be saved as well. And so that was a theological idea first that now is embraced by most Christian denominations, and eventually became its own denomination, especially here in the United States. So interestingly, too, both of those ideas now, Unitarian and the idea of the single totality of God, really now, especially for our atheists, for which there are many, is alive now in this idea of the connectedness of all things, that there's one totality of existence, that, our interconnected web of all existence. And then the Universalists this idea is not so much about being saved and going to heaven as it is about the inherent worth and dignity in every person, as it is about the goodness, the deep down goodness in all people. So those are the roots of our two parts of our name and our theological heritage. And obviously that's the very short answer to a very long inquiry and the beginning of a long engagement with some big complex ideas, which we dig into more in our Journey to Membership class and over many, many years of deepening into a relationship with First Church. But Yeah. And if you have any questions or like to continue the conversation, don't hesitate to reach out to Samuel or myself or anybody on staff or any of our volunteers. So thanks for watching.